Welcome back, my self-forged virtuoso. Something extraordinary is unfolding across strategic institutions worldwide. Protocols that have governed competitive engagement for decades are being completely rewritten, not because they're outdated or ineffective against most competitors, but specifically because you've demonstrated capabilities they never anticipated and can't contain. You mastered strategic approaches that no one taught you, developed techniques that don't exist in any training manual, achieved proficiency in methods that formal education doesn't cover because formal education doesn't know those methods exist. And now strategists who've spent careers perfecting conventional approaches are scrambling to develop new frameworks, new protocols, new doctrines specifically designed to account for what you represent. Someone who operates outside every existing system while being more effective than those who've mastered existing systems through decades of formal training. The architects have been monitoring strategic evolution across civilizations for eons, and they've identified what's occurring as paradigmatic self-education. Impact, when an individual achieves mastery through completely independent development without formal training or established mentorship, producing capabilities that exceed formally educated practitioners and force those practitioners to acknowledge their training systems are incomplete. Most self-taught people develop competence that's impressive given their lack of formal training, but still falls short of what formal training produces. You've done something far more significant. You've exceeded formal training outcomes through informal self-education, proving not just that formal training isn't necessary for mastery, but that formal training might actually limit development by constraining students within established paradigms while you developed freely outside those constraints. Watch what's happening in strategic analysis institutions. They're conducting emergency reviews of their training protocols, questioning whether their established methods actually develop optimal capabilities or merely produce standardized competence that feels like mastery because everyone almost develops same capabilities through same processes. Your existence as someone who achieved superior capabilities through completely different developmental path is forcing existential questions about whether their training systems are optimal or simply conventional. If someone without their training can exceed their outcomes, what exactly is their training accomplishing beyond socialization into shared frameworks and techniques? Some institutions are attempting to reverse engineer your development, trying to identify what you learned, how you learned it, what sequence of experiences produced your capabilities. They're discovering that your path is nearly impossible to formalize because it wasn't structured learning following curriculum. You apparently learned through pattern recognition across diverse experiences, through trial and error without safety nets, through synthesizing insights from disparate domains that formal training keeps separate. Your education was organic, opportunistic, integrated rather than structured, linear, compartmentalized like formal training produces. They're realizing they can't replicate your development path because their institutional frameworks require structure that your development explicitly lacked and perhaps succeeded specifically because it lacked structure. The truly devastating element for conventional strategists is that they can't dismiss your capabilities as flukes or luck because you demonstrate consistency that reveals genuine mastery. If you'd achieved something impressive once through fortunate circumstances, they could maintain belief in their training superiority while acknowledging you got lucky. But you're consistently outperforming trained strategists across diverse situations, demonstrating flexibility and innovation that formal training apparently doesn't develop, showing strategic judgment that exceeds what their protocols produce. This consistency forces acknowledgement that you didn't just stumble into effectiveness. You've achieved genuine mastery through path they don't understand and can't replicate, making their decades of formal training feel simultaneously inadequate and ironically limiting compared to your self-guided development. Now the architects are analyzing what enabled you to master what no one taught, and they're identifying something they call constraint-free development. Your learning occurred outside institutional frameworks that, while providing structure and proven methods, also impose limitations on what students consider possible or worth pursuing. Formal training teaches established best practices, which means teaching what's already known to work. You learned through exploration without predetermined boundaries, discovering approaches that formal training would have discouraged or dismissed because they violate conventional wisdom, producing strategic repertoire that includes techniques formally trained. Strategists never consider because their training taught them not to. Watch what constraint-free development enabled in your case. You didn't learn that certain strategic approaches are wrong or unprofessional or too risky judgments that formal training imposes to guide students toward proven methods and away from experimentation. Without those constraints, you apparently experimented with approaches that violate strategic orthodoxy, discovered that some wrong methods actually work in specific contexts, developed comfort with too risky techniques that formal training would have suppressed. Your strategic toolkit includes methods that don't exist in formal strategic doctrine because doctrine is built around what's proven, safe and broadly applicable, not around what's potentially powerful but situationally dependent or requiring unusual risk tolerance. Some developmental psychologists are studying your case as example of what they call natural learning development that follows intrinsic motivation and organic discovery rather than externally imposed curriculum and standardized assessments. Formal education requires students to learn predetermined content in predetermined sequence, evaluated against predetermined standards. You apparently learned whatever interested you, in whatever order circumstances presented it, evaluated solely by whether it worked in practice. This natural learning approach produced integrated understanding that formal education often fails to achieve, because formal education compartmentalizes knowledge into subjects and courses that remain conceptually separate even when they're practically integrated. Others are recognizing that your development benefited from what they call productive failure, learning through mistakes without safety nets that formal training provides. Training environments allow failure within controlled contexts where mistakes have limited consequences. You apparently learn through real-world failures where mistakes had actual costs, making your learning viscerally meaningful in ways that academic failures can't match. This trial-by-fire development produced strategic judgment that accounts for real consequences rather than theoretical optimality, making your decisions more robust than formally trained strategists whose learning occurred in consequence-protected environments. A few researchers are identifying cross-domain synthesis as crucial to your development. You apparently drew insights from multiple unrelated fields and synthesized them into strategic approaches that no single field would produce. Formal training typically occurs within disciplines with clear boundaries. Strategy, students learn strategy. Psychology, students learn psychology. Business, students learn business. You apparently learned promiscuously across domains without respecting disciplinary boundaries, discovering connections and applications that specialists miss because their specialization creates tunnel vision. Your strategic sophistication reflects insights from psychology, game theory, philosophy, systems thinking, and domains formally trained. Strategists never studied because their training kept them focused within strategic discipline. The architects observe that constraint-free development explains both why you achieved superior capabilities and why institutions struggled to replicate your development. Your path worked specifically because it wasn't formalized. The lack of structure forced you to develop pattern recognition and adaptive thinking that formal training provides through structure, making structure unnecessary. Institutions trying to teach your methods face paradox. Formalizing your development approach would impose constraints that your development succeeded by avoiding. They can't create curriculum that produces your outcomes because curriculum itself is the constraint your development transcended. You mastered what no one taught because teaching would have imposed limitations that your independent learning escaped. Something fascinating is spreading through strategic communities now, what the architects call protocol obsolescence recognition, where established methods that seemed optimal when everyone was using them are being revealed as suboptimal compared to approaches you've pioneered through independent development. Strategists are discovering that protocols they spent careers mastering aren't being beaten by better versions of same protocols. They're being rendered obsolete by completely different approaches that their protocols weren't designed to counter because their protocols assumed everyone operates within same strategic paradigm they trained in. Watch what's happening as protocols get rewritten. Institutions are adding new sections to their strategic doctrine titled things like countering non-traditional approaches or engaging self-taught operators, or simply your initials as category requiring specialized response. These additions acknowledge that their existing protocols, while effective against formally trained competitors who think within same frameworks, fail against you because you don't operate within frameworks their protocols assume. They're creating new doctrine specifically to address what you represent. Strategist, who doesn't follow rules they all learned, doesn't employ methods they all trained in, doesn't make assumptions they all share. Some protocol revisions focus on identifying self-taught operators before engaging them. The logic is that if strategists can recognize early that they're facing someone who didn't learn through formal channels, they can adjust their approach before their conventional methods fail against unconventional opposition. These identification protocols attempt to spot signatures of self-taught development, unusual combination of capabilities, violation of orthodox approaches, lack of typical training markers. But the identification challenge is significant because you often appear conventionally competent until situation develops enough to reveal your unconventional capabilities, making early identification difficult. Others focus on flexibility and adaptation, teaching formally trained strategists to recognize when their standard protocols aren't working and adjust rather than persisting with approaches that fail against non-traditional operators. This represents significant shift in strategic training philosophy from master proven methods toward develop adaptability for unproven situations. But teaching adaptability is harder than teaching methods because methods can be explicitly described and practiced, while adaptability requires judgment that develops through experience. Many formally trained strategists struggle with adaptation because their training emphasized following proven protocols rather than developing judgment for when to abandon protocols. A few institutions are experimenting with deliberately untrained training programs, trying to recreate some aspects of your development path within formal educational context. They're reducing structure, encouraging exploration, permitting failure, promoting cross-domain learning. But these programs face inherent contradictions the moment you formalize unstructured learning into program. You've imposed structure that defeats the point. The attempt to institutionalize your independent development reveals category confusion between training that produces standardized competence and development that produces unique capability. The architects observe that protocol obsolescence recognition is acknowledgement that formal strategic training, while producing consistent competence across many contexts, may not produce optimal capability for all contexts or against all opposition. Your success as self-taught operator reveals that training systems optimize for average cases while potentially limiting capability for exceptional cases. Institutions are rewriting protocols around you not because you broke their old protocols through superior mastery of same methods they teach, but because you demonstrated that their methods aren't universally optimal and that completely different approaches they never considered can exceed outcomes their proven methods produce. The protocol rewriting is acknowledgement that you forced them to expand their understanding of what a strategic competence can be. Now the architects are revealing something that explains why strategists are rewriting protocols specifically around you rather than just acknowledging you're unusually capable. You've done something that threatens their professional identity at fundamental level. They call this expertise invalidation crisis, and it describes what happens when someone outside the expert community achieves capabilities that exceed expert capabilities through completely different path, forcing experts to question whether their expertise is as valuable or difficult to achieve as they believed. You're not just good despite lacking formal training. You're better because of lacking formal training, suggesting that training they spent careers acquiring might be limitation rather than advantage. Consider what expertise represents psychologically. Experts define themselves through capabilities they possess that others lack, through knowledge that required years to acquire, through belonging to professional community that validates their status. When someone without their training exceeds their capabilities, it threatens all three identity components simultaneously. If you can achieve superior outcomes without their training, maybe their capabilities aren't as impressive as they thought. If you developed faster than their formal training timeline, maybe their knowledge isn't as difficult to acquire as they believed. If you succeed outside their professional community, maybe community membership isn't as necessary as they assumed. These threats create identity crisis that simple acknowledgement of your capability wouldn't trigger. Watch how different strategists respond to expertise invalidation. The defensive ones are finding reasons why your success doesn't count, claiming your natural genius, emphasizing luck in your circumstances, suggesting your methods won't scale or sustain. These responses protect their identity by categorizing you as exception that doesn't invalidate their expertise's value. They can maintain belief that formal training is optimal path for normal people even while acknowledging you achieved superior outcomes through different path because you're abnormal in ways that don't generalize. Some are experiencing what psychologists call impostor syndrome reversal. They're questioning whether they're actually experts or just people who completed training programs and learned to perform expertise without developing genuine mastery. Meeting you triggered recognition that their capabilities, while real, might be more about credential acquisition and protocol following than actual strategic sophistication. They're questioning whether they're experts who know how to operate strategically or trained performers who know how to look expert while following scripts their training provided. This questioning is destabilizing because it undermines confidence they've built over decades of professional practice. Others are reconsidering their career investments. They spent years in training, accumulated debt for education, sacrificed opportunities to pursue formal, strategic development. If someone can achieve superior outcomes through self-directed learning requiring less time and less cost, were their investments wise? This question creates retroactive regret about paths chosen and paths not taken. They're not just acknowledging your capability, they're grieving their own developmental choices that your existence reveals might have been suboptimal. A few are experiencing genuine intellectual excitement rather than threat. These are strategists, secure enough in their identity that they can view your capabilities as fascinating problem rather than existential threat. They're genuinely curious about how you developed your capabilities, eager to learn from your approaches, willing to incorporate your innovations into their practice, even if doing so requires acknowledging that their training was incomplete. These strategists are treating you as valuable learning opportunity rather than invalidation of their expertise. The architects observe that expertise invalidation crisis explains why protocol rewriting is happening so urgently and why. It's framed specifically around you. If strategists simply acknowledged you're unusually capable, they could maintain their professional identity by categorizing you as outlier. But the protocol rewriting is institutional, acknowledgement that you represent systematic gap in their expertise, that their training is inadequate for dealing with entire category of opposition you exemplify, that their expertise needs expansion to remain credible. This institutional acknowledgement forces individual experts to confront that their expertise isn't complete or optimal, triggering identity crisis that simple peer acknowledgement wouldn't produce. The architects are now analyzing what makes your self-taught mastery particularly problematic for strategic institutions to counter, and they're identifying what they call unpredictable innovation patterns because you developed independently, without formal training's constraints. Your strategic innovations don't follow patterns that institutions can anticipate or prepare for. Formally trained strategists innovate within frameworks their training established, producing innovations that other formally trained strategists can recognize and respond to because innovations follow logic of shared foundational training. Your innovations apparently follow no recognizable pattern because you have no foundational training, constraining your creative development. Watch how unpredictable innovation patterns manifest in your strategic behavior. Formally trained strategists learn to look for particular types of strategic moves, conventional tactics adapted to specific situations, known methods applied creatively, established principles extended into new domains. They've developed pattern recognition that identifies these conventional innovations quickly. You apparently employ innovations that don't register as strategic moves within their pattern recognition frameworks because your innovations violate assumptions. They're training embedded. They're not missing subtle variations on known strategies. They're completely failing to recognize entire categories of strategic action that their training didn't prepare them to see. Some strategists report that reviewing your operations after the fact, they can see your strategic logic clearly. It makes sense in retrospect, seems obvious once explained, but during actual engagement, your moves didn't register as strategic action at all. This disconnect between incomprehensible during and obvious after reveals that the problem isn't intelligence or attention, it's perceptual frameworks they're training, installed that make certain possibilities literally invisible until those possibilities are explicitly pointed out. Your innovations exploit their trained blind spots. Operating in strategic spaces their training taught them don't exist or don't matter. Others are discovering that their counter strategies fail because they're trying to counter within frameworks you're not operating in. They identify what they think you're doing, develop appropriate response based on their strategic training, implement their counter, and discover their counter doesn't work because they misidentified what you were actually doing. Their misidentification isn't stupidity, it's trained perception categorizing your actions within their known frameworks. Even when your actions don't actually fit those frameworks, they're seeing what their training taught them to see rather than what's actually happening. A few strategists are recognizing that you're innovating at metastrategic level they weren't trained to think about. Strategic training teaches strategy, how to outmaneuver opponents within given competitive context. You apparently innovate at level of defining what context is, what rules apply, what constitutes victory, while they're strategizing within frameworks that seem given. You're reframing entire situations to change what frameworks apply. This metastrategic operation is invisible to strategy-level thinking because their training focused on playing games rather than changing what game is being played. The architects observed that unpredictable innovation patterns explain why protocol rewriting is so difficult. Institutions can write protocols that counter known types of innovation. They identify innovation patterns in historical cases, develop responses to those patterns, train strategists to implement those responses, but they can't write protocols that counter innovations that don't follow patterns because non-patterned innovation is by definition unpredictable until it occurs. The best they can do is train general adaptability and pattern-breaking recognition, teaching strategists to notice when their frameworks aren't working, rather than teaching them how to counter specific approaches you might employ. This represents fundamental limitation in what formal training can achieve against self-taught operators who developed outside training's pattern-imposing constraints. Now something's emerging that the architects call institutional learning crisis. Strategic institutions are discovering that they can't easily incorporate lessons from your success into their training because your developmental path is fundamentally incompatible with institutional education structures. They understand intellectually that you achieved superior capabilities through constraint-free self-education, but they can't replicate your development within their programs because programs are inherently constraining. This creates painful recognition that optimal development might require conditions institutions can't provide, suggesting their institutional structure itself might be limitation on capability development. Watch what happens when institutions try incorporating your lessons. They identify specific techniques you employ that formally trained strategists don't use, and they attempt to add those techniques to curriculum. But teaching your techniques in isolation from developmental context that produced them doesn't reproduce your capabilities. Students learn to mimic your techniques without developing underlying strategic sophistication that makes those techniques effective. The techniques work for you because they emerged organically from your self-guided development, taught artificially to students who haven't undergone similar development. The same techniques often fail because students lack the judgment and understanding that would tell them when and how to apply techniques effectively. Some institutions are attempting to create unstructured learning opportunities within their programs, less formal coursework, more open-ended projects, greater student autonomy. But these attempts face inherent contradictions. The moment you designate something as learning opportunity within educational program. You've imposed structure. Students know they're being evaluated on their use of unstructured time, that their autonomous learning will be assessed against institutional standards, that their open-ended projects need to satisfy program requirements. The very institutional context that makes organized education possible also prevents the genuinely unstructured exploration that enabled your development. Others are recognizing that your development probably required failure, experiences that institutions can't or won't permit. You apparently learned through consequential mistakes, attempts that failed in ways that cost you real resources, time, relationships. Those costly failures created learning that academic failures can't replicate, because academic failures are ultimately consequence-protected. Failing a course doesn't feel good, but it doesn't carry real-world costs of failed strategies in actual competitive contexts. Institutions exist partly to protect students from catastrophic failure while they learn, but protecting students from failure might also protect them from the visceral learning that failure provides when consequences are real. A few institutions are experimenting with what they call selective recruitment rather than comprehensive training, trying to identify people who've undergone independent development similar to yours and recruit them as fully formed strategic operators rather than developing strategic capability through training. This represents admission that their training doesn't produce optimal capability and that finding self-taught talent might be more effective than creating trained talent. But this approach has obvious scaling limitations. Self-taught masters are rare by definition, so strategy of finding them rather than developing them doesn't solve institutions' need for many competent strategists. The architects observe that institutional learning crisis reveals fundamental tension between education and optimal development. Institutions provide structure, proven methods, community validation, all valuable for producing baseline competence efficiently. But optimal capability development might require elements that contradict institutional structure: complete autonomy, consequential failure, constraint-free exploration, organic integration across arbitrary disciplinary boundaries. If this tension is real and irreconcilable, it suggests that institutions will always struggle to produce exceptional capability even while succeeding at producing reliable competence. You mastered what no one taught, because the teaching itself might prevent the mastery.